Commentator and a director on the Council of Arab-British Understanding. He joins me live from London. Chris, great to have you here with us on TRT World. You just heard our correspondent Ashraf Shannon there. He was saying that despite the challenges, people in Gaza want to stay, but it's Donald Trump who's using this argument of Gaza being uninhabitable to force Palestinians out of their territory.
Donald Trump's plan is unworkable, illegal, immoral. And I think that the hope is that the various Arab states, led in part by Egypt, are producing a proposal that would allow for the reconstruction of Gaza without actually having to empty its population. But also, it's not that he's just wanting Donald Trump to empty Gaza. It's also that he is refusing to countenance that they would be allowed to come back when the reconstruction is done, and that it actually would become under US control. There is an argument to say that it would be easier to rebuild Gaza should there be no population. It would be easier to demolish it, to clear away all the unexploded ordnance. That is true. But the trouble is that, of course, for Palestinians, they have an extremely painful history of forced displacement that goes back to 1947-49, that also involves displacement in 1967. And of course, during the last 16 months, when many in Gaza have been displaced multiple times, so 90% in total have been displaced. So Palestinians are resolute in their determination to stay in Gaza, not to be forced out, because they firmly believe they'd never be allowed to go back. So I think Donald Trump's plan is unworkable. I think the fear is, of course, that it will be forced upon Palestinians through further Israeli action at some point during the next few months, assuming that the current deal breaks down, which I think most observers believe will actually happen.
Now, Chris, I understand Palestinians are united, but is there unity enough to stop Donald Trump, or would you say the international community has to come up with a more decisive plan to stop Donald Trump and Netanyahu from cleansing the Gaza Strip from Palestinians?
I mean, Donald Trump will start getting his way, and Netanyahu as well, of course, if there is division and hesitancy amongst key international players. So we're seeing Arab states gathering together, key members coming up with this plan, but it will require European actors, Canada and other countries to say, yeah, we back that plan. President Trump, you must ditch your own suggestion. And indeed, you could go on then, if you wish, to appeal to his ego, to credit him for at least shaking up the conversation and debate about this, that actually his proposals have, forced such states to come up with their own proposals. But, that would be very generous, because, it's very clear that he is buying into a very far-right Israeli project to empty Gaza, to replace it with non-Palestinians. Ideally for them, Israelis, intriguingly, perhaps Donald Trump thinks that the United States will have somehow sovereign rights over Gaza. I do not understand how he thinks that. So it is all a mess. Hopefully, Donald Trump can be persuaded to accept and back a sensible Arab plan. And that must have certain ingredients. It needs to be designed by Palestinians. It needs to have a Palestinian buy-in. You cannot exclude them from this process any more than you can exclude Ukrainians from the negotiations over the future of their own country. Palestinians must have a say in how they're going to be ruled, how it's going to be reconstructed, that after that reconstruction, when it's finished, that Gaza will be properly open with a port, with an airport, the ability to travel and trade freely, and to be part of a state of Palestine, which of course should include the other part of the occupied Palestinian territory, the West Bank. That's the way forward. And anything less than that, anything that actually does not give Palestinians control of their own destiny, is doomed to failure.
Chris, let me get your thoughts on the ceasefire deal now. It seems to me Hamas has decided to be proactive and release all the remaining hostages, at least announce that they are going to be releasing all the remaining hostages. But we haven't seen similar initiatives from the Israeli side. Why is that?
I think that Israel will be looking at its options. I think that the Netanyahu government is under a lot of pressure to ensure that hostages get released, so that if they were to remount Israeli military activity on Gaza right now and break that whilst hostages could be released, that would be a huge political domestic problem for the Netanyahu coalition. So my contention is they will try to get the maximum number of hostages and bodies out of Gaza before resuming military operations. And I said right from the moment this deal was signed, including on TRT, that it would be the end of the first phase after 42 days that the real test came about. And I think what we are seeing is actually both within Palestinian circles and amongst Israelis, a desire to keep this process going forward, that actually people, not just Palestinians in Gaza, who have the most to lose in all of this, of course, are exhausted and tired of this conflict. They would actually like to see it ended. It is the warmongers, particularly on the Israeli right, who believe that somehow they can go back into Gaza and destroy Hamas, which is not a feasible war aim, that are the ones who are likely to keep this going. And that is really the challenge, with the backing of Donald Trump. But I think at a popular level, most Israelis and most Palestinians would actually like to see the end of hostilities and what can we got through negotiations in a diplomatic process.
Chris Doyle, thanks very much for joining me here on TRT World. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.